Let me start with a question. What is the opposite of fragile? Very good, thanks for the first response. This is the typical response that you receive about 90% of the time as a response to this question. But let's think about this for a second. What does it mean to be fragile? So usually if you send presents for Christmas that are breakable, fragile, you put them in a box, you send them off and you put a label on it, handle with care. Because if you drop it, it will break. Of course. So what is the opposite of this? What would you write on a box to express exactly the opposite? It's like an orange juice. You say shake before consumption. That means fragility means we have a system in front of us. If it is exposed to stress, disturbances, or other sorts of external events, it will eventually break. Take a glass or anything breakable. The opposite is you take a system, you shake it, you expose it to stress, and it's getting better. It's growing. You think, well, this is hardly conceivable. But if you're going to the gym and you stress out your muscles, what's going to happen? Does the muscle weaken or does it get stronger? So you stress the muscle and it will get stronger. That's a reaction, anti-fragile. It's the opposite of being fragile. So the answer to this question is not robust, because robust simply means I expose my system or my object to stress and it doesn't bother. But it doesn't gain, it doesn't lose. It's just in the middle. So we have always this triad: fragility, anti-fragility, and in between robustness. So if you think in Greek mythology, fragility is kind of represented by the sword of Damocles. And robustness would be represented by the phoenix, who comes back from the ashes all the time. He's robust, not really winning anything, but you can't kill it either. Anti-fragility is kind of represented by Hydra. Hydra, if you chop off the head, 9 more grow back. So the more you stress it, the more it comes back. If you're more into cartoons, then I would use the picture of the Incredible Hulk. Hulk! The more stress, the more angry the Incredible Hulk is, the more powerful he will be. So he would be a representation of being anti-fragile. The robustness would be Superman. Well, who can beat Superman in the absence of kryptonite? So, but he's basically indestructible, so robust. And who is fragile? Well, I was thinking about it, maybe Donald Duck. Donald Duck, he's always good intentions, but there's always some stress coming up, something coming along the way that ruins his plans, and he's always keep losing his plans. So, why am I telling you about this? Because this concept of anti-fragility is a very essential part if you're dealing with uncertainty, if you're dealing with risk. So, if you are thinking about starting a company, if you're starting a venture, anything, then one of the things that you're dealing with is uncertainty and risk. And what are we usually doing in order to kind of domesticate risk and uncertainty? We make a plan. We have a plan, and if the plan is well thought through, it can be turned into a business plan. And then once this business plan is successful, we just execute it and we'll be successful. At least that's as far as the theory goes. Point is, on this list of anti-fragility, robustness, and fragility, plans are certainly in the category of being fragile. So I think everybody has the experience that you made a plan, either for meeting your friends or going for a date or going on a vacation trip or whatever. And those plans were just dusted or put into the dust because of some little things that happened. Unforeseen things that destroyed all your plans. Hollywood is full of films that take their thrill out of plans that were just basically thrown over by little coincidences, by catastrophes or anything else. So plans are very fragile because whenever you expose them to stress and disturbances, they break apart. But of course we have always this notion of having a plan B. So we can always switch plans because we are planning ahead. There may be some disturbances and there may be some adversity ahead, and we have to prepare for it. So have a plan B. But what does a plan B mean? It means I foresee some trouble and I have a second plan, or maybe a third plan. But eventually we'll be running out of plans, and there's always a lot of disturbances and events happening that you could never foresee, which still crumble your plans into nothing. There's a lot of other plans. People are partially obsessed with having plans for their career plans, or project plans for research proposals. All very obsessed with plans. Recently, I got a request from a student who was asking me for my advice. He said, I have a plan. I would like to have some advice on how to plan my career. And I'm always a little bit concerned about this because, well, you're wasting time on planning your career because very most likely it will be destroyed by some unforeseen events. They will destroy the plan. I have like hundreds of history in my own career of plans that never went wrong, never worked out. They all went wrong, and I basically at some point in time I gave up on making any further plans. So, as I said, plans are designed as a tool to domesticate uncertainty, but it doesn't work. So what can you do? How can you potentially be more anti-fragile? Maybe to harvest the volatility and the disturbances and the uncertainties in the world. And there are plenty of. It's the term optionality. You just wander through life and you are looking out for options. Options as they turn up. What's an option? Well, in financial terms, you would say, I buy the right for a low amount of money to have something more valuable later on at a lower price. It simply means I look at the asymmetry in real life. That means I look at situations where the downside is very small in comparison to maybe unbounded upside. And then I invest into this thing, either in time or in money or whatever, to have an option for a big story. The big story for options is the Thales of Milet. He lived about more than 2,500 years ago. He was a philosopher, and he was basically criticized by his peers that he was never really doing real work, and so he could not criticize others for their doings. And then he made a smart move. He went to the oil mills around him in his area and bought an option. He said, next summer, you only take the olive oils to press that I bring you. Anyone else will be if I ask for it. And in this particular year, the olive oil harvest was overwhelming. So all the farmers were looking for oil mills, but the only person they had to go to was the Thales of Milet, who said and charged them to have access to the oil mills. And he made a fortune. So he was taking a little risk by buying an option just to have the right to request the oil mills. Small downside. And if the oil harvest would have not been very overwhelming, he probably would not have chosen to execute his option and lost a little bit of money. So the idea of an option is that you take the asymmetry, small cost, small risk, small returns or small loss, but you have on the other side maybe the potential for almost unlimited winnings. That's a kind of the idea of an option. So you look around as you walk through your life and you look out for options, things that were never planned, that just pop up as an opportunity, you can also call them. Grab them and be aware that they are around. It's not that easy as it may sound in the first place, but plans, if you have plans have the tendency to make you option blind. You don't see the options around you anymore. So maybe the best thing is you have a plan, because the plan also indicates that you have been thinking about all the details that are necessary, but don't feel obliged to stick to the plan to the very end, just executing it. Put it on the side, walk through life, and watch out for the options. The options give you an opportunity to learn. Incremental learning by doing things. And that's the important part of the options. It gives you an upside if it appears, if you can identify, and if you can see that the option is giving you an upside. And typically, plans are straight. And if you look at successful companies, they started out with a straight business plan, they saw options and turned around and ended up somewhere completely different. In the end, if you're successful, you can always make a backward narrative that it was all part of the plan. Usually this is not true. I would say that was my experience in my industry days. Follow the options, be open to options. Regardless if you do a career plan, don't plan your career. Be open for options. If I were not be open for options during my career, I would not be here. I would probably be still living in industry, happy and gay. But I basically was using the opportunity to turn into an academic, which is giving me lots of opportunities to exercise options. So learning as long as you go in incremental steps, looking out for options. Don't be uptight with planning and go crazy about plans and executing plans. Plans are only important for bureaucrats. Because if you're going for bureaucrats, they want to see a plan and they want to check in equal distances if you have satisfied your plan. And very often, 3-4 months into the plan, it's obsolete and you can forget about it. So then you still have to justify your deviation from the plan with the bureaucrats. And sometimes you say, well, we cannot continue with your funding because you have not fulfilled your obligations as written down in the work description. That's typically what happens with European projects. So my recommendation is then simply say, okay, don't spend too much time on planning. Look out for the opportunities, for the options in your life, regardless of what type of a career, business planning, whatever it is. In particular, don't get hooked up with strategic planning. As far as I know, there's no scientific evidence that strategic planning ever worked out. It's just like a graveyard full of disturbed and trashed plans, strategic plans. But usually companies pay a lot of money for strategic plans. So don't get caught up in plans. Learning, one thing about incremental learning. Following options gives you the opportunity to learn as you go. In little portions. And this is important because think of the picture that you're standing under a rock. And the rock is 500 tons. Now let's say 500 kilos, just be humble. If the rock drops down on you on 500 kilos, you will be squashed. But if the rock is kind of turned into little pebbles, the same mass, but then the pebbles come down on you, well, of course, it will be some kind of rough, but you will survive. That's the idea about learning and planning and options, because planning means you are trying to avoid all the little learnings and all the mistakes and the errors in order to get to the final goal. So if the plan is wrong, you will see the error, the big arrow has compiled up to the end. You have to pay for a wrong product, for a wrong plan. If you stick too long in the hidden, for instance. If you go for small incremental changes, you learn each time you make an error in a small portion, like the little pebble falling on your head, not disturbing you too much. And that's the intention. You have to learn as you go, in small little things, in small little potions, and stay away from lethal errors. Because if you're dead, I mean figuratively speaking, then you can't really recover from any mistake. That's the beauty of options. Options give you the opportunity to learn in incremental little steps. So learning in incremental little steps is extremely important, and I'm always currently getting to the point to ask myself, are we doing the right thing at the university level? Teaching you to a class? Shouldn't you have more opportunities to learn by doing and learning by lots of little small mistakes? And I think that's exactly what is an element of the CDTM. Here we usually proclaim it as the home for your ideas. I would say it's also a playground for making little mistakes, to get prepared, to stay anti-fragile, to grow with your mistakes and make yourself stronger. So try to stay with the options, try to stay with little learnings, try to stay anti-fragile. Thank you.